Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today I'm taking a look at a really interesting birth chart that I did recently that overlapped with a horary that I did. I think it's really interesting to watch how natal charts will sometimes give you a certain level of information about something that's going on in a person's life, and then a horary chart might be consulted, and the horary chart might back up what the birth chart is saying, vice versa. So this is an interesting, I think, demonstration, hopefully for those of you who like to study at home and follow along with, the demo videos that I do once in a while. I think the main thing that I'm hoping that people get from these is just, you know, basically tips of the trade, insights into technique, and that these demonstrations can be helpful for those of you who either can't afford to take any classes whatsoever, or who perhaps don't have the time to take classes and try to just learn what you can here or there online. So at any rate, there's a spiritual component to this story and a counseling component to this story and these charts that I'm going to be talking about today as well, specifically dealing with death and loss and the moment of death and things like that too. So hopefully you'll find this interesting on a variety of different levels. So let's begin with the story, just so you know. I'm going to give this away and sort of tell you what happened. So I had a client of mine who is both a client and a private apprentice of mine that I've been working with for several years. She gave me permission to share this story today, who recently lost her cat. Her cat's a very, some people have animals and they're around, but you're not very close to them. Other people have animals, they're around and they're like your best friend. So she's in that latter category. This cat was like her best friend, and the cat just passed this last month. And I'm going to show you how you can see the passing of the cat on 3 different levels. 1 in the birth chart with transits, 2 through a technique called zodiacal releasing, and 3 with a horary chart. And then we're going to talk about the actual experience of saying goodbye to her cat and what she learned about that, given the fact that she knew by virtue of being a student of astrology that this was likely to occur. So let's dive in, and we'll take a look at her birth chart first. So what I want to, let's see if I can share my screen here. All right. So here is, I'm calling her client N, and here is a double wheel. The inner wheel is her birth chart and the outer wheel are the transits. Now, when it comes to pets in ancient astrology, an animal that's smaller than, say, a sheep or a goat is going to be located in the 6th house. For her, that house is occupied by Cancer in whole sign houses. And that makes the ruler of the topic of small animals the moon, in her birth chart in particular. So now what we see happening is right around the summer solstice, there was an eclipse right in her 6th house, a solar eclipse. And eclipses, although they can be very positive, are often omens of, of releasing something or of letting go of something, because there's literal eclipsing that's happening. So they're omens of change, really intense and often dramatic change. 6th house eclipses often will coincide with illness or difficulties or hardships, because this 6th house was traditionally called the house of Mars, or the joy of Mars, and the house of bad fortune. Now, bad fortune in the ancient world could mean just like, oh man, I've got a flat tire, or, oh man, I twisted my ankle. It doesn't have to be bad fortune as in you're doomed. Just the stuff of life that comes up that can make us stronger because we face it. It's also a house that was associated with hard labor, and also things that we don't want to have to do that we end up being made to do somehow. It's also associated with farm animals, and animals that are smaller than a goat or a sheep. So cat would be in this house, and the moon in her chart is thus going to represent potentially small animals, among many other things like mothers or family, sometimes property, health. The moon can represent a lot of different things. So we see right around June 21st, we see a solar eclipse in the 6th house. At the same time, you'll notice that as that eclipse is coming through, the planet Mars, who is one signifier of things like death and, again, strife and hardships. Remember, the sixth house is called the joy of Mars, the planet that is associated with strife and challenges in life, as well as other things like competition, courage, and so forth. Mars is also the natural ruler of surgeries. At any rate, remember that Mars is exalted in Capricorn, which was called the gateway of the gods, and the planet and the sign associated with winter solstice and death. So Mars has this long-standing association with strife and death and war and things like that. So Mars is applying to the moon, the ruler of the sixth house, by an opposition. And it is happening just after a solar eclipse in the sixth house. So that's the setup natally. Now, there's a lot of other observations you could make about the chart. I'm not suggesting that there's only one way of seeing an event in a birth chart. You'll find that when you study ancient astrology, more often than not, the cool thing is that you're going to largely see the same, maybe 2 or 3 signatures in a chart speaking to the nature of something that's about to happen or that has happened. And largely practitioners will see the same things and agree because they're using the same craft language, which is why I love ancient astrology so much. Because for me, I basically wanted that kind of commonality of craft. That's one great thing that ancient astrology gives. So here, very clearly, we see the eclipse in the house of small animals. We see Mars, which is one of the gods of death, opposing the moon, ruler of the sixth house, and the moon is in the eighth house, which is the house of death as well. So this is the event that shows the death of the cat. Now, the cat didn't die until later into July. These things don't play out immediately, but the cat initially needed a surgery, and the surgery happened as Mars was exactly opposing the moon, ruler of the sixth. And then subsequently, after that surgery, the cat didn't end up recovering very well and ended up passing later in July. So that's the natal version of what happened. Now, let us shift gears now and take a look at the horary. So in this chart, you're going to see the horary that was asked the next day after the eclipse, which is, will Lovely's surgery go okay? This is one of my students who happens to be in Egypt. And so she was casting her horary chart, and I was helping her read it because she's a student in my horary class. One of my private students in as well. So at any rate, now in this case, she's asking, will Lovely's surgery go okay? This is her cat, Lovely. So we go to the sixth house to see that this is the house of animals that are small animal like a cat. The Taurus is sitting on the cusp of the sixth house. So that means that the cat is going to be represented by Venus. Now, the surgery is going to be represented by Mars. It's the natural ruler of surgeries. One thing that we can do is just look at the reception to see if the surgery has any power over Lovely and Lovely's condition. And there's a couple of different ways you could actually break down the illness that Lovely has. One thing that's kind of promising here is that Mars exalts Venus, which means you could say that the surgery is going to lift up Venus, the cat, Lovely. That's actually what happened. The surgery was a success and eliminated a problem that she was having. It turns out, though, that that was only one of a couple of underlying problems that the cat was having. And the cat ended up needing a few subsequent surgeries, perhaps denoted by Mars, Lord of Surgery, in a double-bodied sign, which can mean multiples. And the subsequent surgeries that she needed to address additional problems that were other than the problem that this particular surgery was addressing and this particular horary was asking about, that these other subsequent surgeries were not able to fix and deal with the other problems that the cat was having. But initially you look at this and you go, well, it looks like the surgery could really help because the surgery is exalting the cat. Is in Mars, the surgery is in the exaltation of Venus. So that, that's perhaps a good sign. Now there's, again, like with medical horary, it's not, there's a variety of different techniques and approaches that people use in horary. And I'm saying that in advance because I know that people who are more, if you are someone who is really into medical horary, you may have a very different way of approaching or handling things like this. To me, it was just an initially good sign that this surgery could go all right. But the things that I was concerned about, first of all, probably, top list of my considerations is, look, we've got the moon in the house of death in this horary. Clearly, our querent is concerned about the potential death of the cat, but that's not the greatest omen in the world to have the moon in the eighth house in such a chart. The other thing that's happening is that Venus, the cat, lovely, is about to station, retrograde, so debilitated, and about to station, which is not necessarily a great sign. So, oh, you know what? I'm just realizing that this, let's see. Okay, there we go. Okay, sorry, I was just fixing something there. All right, so not like the world's greatest sign that Venus is stationing. Why? Because if a living being if you're wondering about the health of a living being, and that living being is being depicted as about to stop moving, right? That can be a picture of death. So Venus is about to station. The other thing is, if we look at the derived eighth house from the sixth, that would be the house of death that's relevant to the cat. And that's the turned eighth from the sixth, which is the first. The ruler of that house is Jupiter. And we do see that Jupiter and Venus are forming a contra antitia with one another. I've explained antitia and contra antitia before, but they are forming a contra antitia with one another. So lovely, the cat is about to stop moving and form a contra antitia with the Lord of Death. So the first surgery was successful, but then there were underlying problems that were found. The issue didn't resolve itself because although they fixed the problem that the surgeon went in to fix, there were other problems that when the cat got home were discovered that ended up needing a subsequent surgery or something like that, and then the cat passed. So this horary, when I read it for the person, with this client of mine, student of mine, and we looked at it, she was obviously very distraught about her cat, and I was really torn because I was going like, it looks like the surgery may, if the surgery is exalting Venus, that could be a very good thing, but it also looks as though, Venus is about to hit the Lord of Death and stop moving, and that really, so it was a puzzling blend of signatures. It ended up making sense again because the cat had the surgery was successful, but the cat was still ill. They found out these other issues, and then the cat shortly after died. So that's the horary level of this. Now, the other thing that is really just interesting to note, and this is for people who may be a little bit more advanced in terms of your knowledge of Hellenistic astrology. In Hellenistic astrology, there is a technique that's used, a different series of techniques that are used that are all referred to as Time Lord systems. A Time Lord tells you what kinds of planets and themes will be in power at different times in a person's life. Used alongside of transits, you can very specifically predict and talk about things that are going to happen. So for example, let's see here. Okay. So in this person's chart, let's just take a look. You probably can't see the tabulation that I have up, but as of December 5th of 2018, this person entered into a 25-month-long Cancer-ruled or Cancer-occupied sixth house period. So that's the moon as the ruler of the period in the eighth house, and the sixth house as the overall 25-month-long topical area of focus. During this time, native thinks that she got COVID, was sick for like 3 months in Egypt, really intensely. And then also her cat died, right? So sixth house, illness, disease, suffering, etc. She's had not only this, but a few other health problems since December of 2018. Then more recently, thinks that she had COVID for 3 months, hasn't been tested for it, unfortunately, but is now feeling better. And then during this period, the cat died. So very, unfortunately, some of the more difficult sixth house themes were a part of this 25 months. Here's what's interesting is this 25-month period in zodiacal releasing terms. The 25-month-long period will focus on these themes in general. The sixth house, the moon as the ruler within the eighth house, and so on and so forth. during this period of time between May 16th of 2020 this year and July 22nd of 2020, which was just yesterday as I'm making this video, this person went through what is called a loosing of the bond. And the loosing of the bond happens, a good way of thinking about it is that every karmic period that we're in through zodiacal releasing has a set amount of time. Like this, in this case, this period is 25 months focused on Cancer in the 6th house. There is a point during that 25-month long period where the karmic blossoming of that period is going to reach an energetic peak. And as it does so, everything intensifies and sort of culminates. And then as soon as that period's over, it's as though the power of the entire time period is being released, and slowly the season of karma is starting to fade. So another simple way of thinking about it is, let's say that you're at a movie, and the action is building in this movie, and it's culminating in the critical scene, and then the energy starts to dissipate and the resolution of the film starts to occur. That moment is often encapsulated by what's called the loosing of the bond period. And those happen within certain cycles after a certain amount of time. So she's in a 6th house Cancer period that starts in December 2018, while eclipses are starting to come through in that house. She goes through a lot of rough health trials, included potentially getting COVID. And then during the loosing of the bond of this 25-month long period, her cat died. So that is just a presentation of a few different techniques that we use in Hellenistic astrology in order to sort of predict and meaningfully discuss what kinds of themes and topics. Now, could I say in advance specifically that you're going to get COVID from a worldwide epidemic, or that you're going to get really sick even, or that your cat's going to die? No, I wouldn't make any of those exact predictions, because it's really not the point of astrology to do so, as much as it is to say, what kind of season are you about to go through? What kinds of themes and topics are likely to be activated? What kind of karma is about to blossom in the garden of the garden of your life? And in knowing that, we can be prepared for it. So now I want to share with you some of the spiritual insights and kind of, I guess you could call it the counseling side of an astrology meeting, although it's not therapy in any formal sense. So one of the things that she expressed, because we talked both in email and through our classroom sessions about this experience that she expressed, was this feeling of helplessness, knowing that as soon as her cat got ill and she saw the time period loosing of the bond, the Mars opposition, and so forth, and several other things that were the horary and so forth, that she knew that it was probably Lovely's time. And she was caught between a feeling of helplessness and a feeling of sort of awe and reverence, and knowing that the celestial and universal laws of nature are at work, that they're trustworthy, they're beautiful, they're painful, but caught between basically the feeling of being helpless, like I want to do something, but I can't. And then this feeling of beauty and awe and surrender. And one of the things that we talked about as she processed these feelings was that it's important not to just say to ourselves, well, the surrender is the important part, and your anxiety or your attempt to do something is like some kind of bad reaction or bad response. Actually, in my experience of seeing so many people over 10 years, actually 10 years yesterday that I've been a full-time astrologer. I started my practice July 22nd of 2010. So it's 10 years of practice. That I think it's really, really important that people engage their free will, that people engage their sense of agency, responsibility, choice, and that people engage that with what they're seeing and going through in their lives as students of astrology, that we try to actively make choices, that we run up against the limits of our free will. So in other words, when she was expressing, I feel helpless, I'm trying to do something, but I can't. Should I have had the surgeries for her? Should I have just said, no, she's going to die anyway and let it go? And my point was that it's really important that we not think about it so much in terms of there being a right or a wrong. Because if you think about it from the standpoint of what, at least what the yogic scriptures tell us and what ancient astrologers believed about the reality of the soul, which is that it is unborn and undying and eternal, um, we don't have to be so afraid of life and death. And when we're not afraid of birth and death in these material forms, when we realize that they are a part of, you know, a learning that's taking place and a growing and an exploration, that it's being divinely guided, that it's all good in an ultimate sense, we can take the pressure off from ourselves in terms of the decisions that we make or that we're faced with or that we don't know how to handle. And we can sort of say, look, I'm going to try, I'm just going to do my best. And if we can try to do our best with humility, knowing that we don't always have all the answers, that we're not always in control, there's a kind of, we're letting go of our expectations about how things will turn out. And if astrology teaches us anything, it's not that we don't have free will. It's that we shouldn't have expectations about how things will go. We should do our best. We should use our free will, knowing that our free will is also not always the only factor, right? So at any rate, I thought that was a really meaningful conversation that the two of us had. But there's one more thing that came up that she said, which is that she was driving her cat to the vet on the day that her cat actually passed. And her cat was, breathing heavily and weak and in a difficult state in the back. And she was looking back from her driver's seat and looking back and saying, "It's okay. We'll get you there soon. We'll try to get you some help." She kept looking back, kept looking forward. And she realized that her cat was about to die. And she was trying to maintain eye contact and be there for her cat. And then in a moment, she turned because she sort of couldn't bear to look. And she was processing that with me and talking about how she wasn't sure if she did the right thing or not, that, should I have looked and really maintained my eye contact with her? And did I do something selfish? These are deep, deep questions. And I certainly don't have all the answers, and I can't pretend like I know what she should or shouldn't have done or anything like that. But again, one of the things that I said was, remember that this is a process that someone's going through as they have had the same insights into the charts that I've just presented to you in advance of it all happening. So that's a really unique position from which to go through the events. And I said this, the one thing that I added was just that in the Bhagavad Gita, first of all, Krishna again reminds us that we are all eternal souls, that we can't ultimately be harmed, that we are all always being guided, that everything is happening in a perfectly harmonious way, even though from our investments in material nature, we don't always see or experience that. That's really hard for people. I know that that's really hard. It does not change the fact that everything is a part of a divine whole that is divinely guided and willed in a direction of goodness, truth, beauty, justice, etc. That doesn't change the fact that we have difficult choices, that we experience right or wrong, that we experience pain or suffering, that we harm each other, or that we let each other down in different ways. But we have to be able to hold those experiences, those difficult choices, those letdowns, those did I do the right thing or not? Or we have to be able to hold them within this greater context. That's really important. And then one other thing that I mentioned was that, in yoga, it's very clear throughout the yogic philosophical texts, from the Vedas and Upanishads down to the Puranas, that the moment of death is really, really important. So when a person dies, what shapes and guides their transmigration into the next step of their journey? Maybe they go right back to God. But what guides the next step in the journey has to do with the quality of the consciousness and the subject matter that one is preoccupied with or fixated on at the time of death. So that's why it's really important in most, whether you're looking at the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or you're looking at the different ceremonies that were conducted in Egypt or in India and many different parts of the world, that in death, it's very important that we midwife, in a sense, that process and help the soul aim itself and its consciousness toward God. Look at the light. We say, look, focus, just stay with the light, stay with the light. What is that about? When we say that saying or whatever. Well, it's about the idea that we should be taking our own sentimental attachments or our own way of standing in between the dying being and God. Try to bring that back, even if we need to grieve a lot later, to really help the soul realize it's okay. You're just leaving your body. It's just your body. You're not your body. You're a spirit. Uh, Let me help you. By making you comfortable, by making you feel safe. And one thing that I helped her to consider was just the idea that in anxiety and worry and fear and sadness, looking back at your cat going, like, it's okay, we're going to be there soon. Just hold on. That in that turning away for just a moment, it's also possible that maybe you gave her the space to leave. And so that's just it was a really important moment, because again, you can imagine that a person, in such a moment, turning away, not bearing to see it, could feel like they were abandoning the cat. Sometimes, maybe God just turned your head slightly. Maybe part of that turning away was filled with some degree of guilt or shame or something. It doesn't have to be black or white, but in that turning, maybe there was a space available for the cat to leave as well. So these are the kinds of conversations that are they are closely connected to living a life that is astrological, because living a life that's astrological is not just about what's going to happen and how accurately can I predict what's going to happen. It's about understanding the season of karma that we're in, and then you have to go through it equipped with making choices and sometimes failing, or sometimes questioning whether we did the right thing, questioning to what degree we could have changed or shifted things. I recommend that people hold that tension. Don't collapse into inevitability, necessity, fate. Well, there was no other way. It had to be this way. That was it. No, we all know, I think, intuitively, that we have choice, and that things, it's a moving field, a kshetra, a field of karma. It's moving, it's alive, it's organic, and our participation really matters. But the laws governing it are also bigger than us, and oftentimes the momentum of our karma and events set in place are not in our control. Hug the mystery between those two phenomenon. I have choice, things are out of my control. Stay in that choice, because it's in staying in there and sort of suffering through, should I have the surgery for the cat? Shouldn't I? Should I have been looking at the cat? Shouldn't I? And then knowing that you're in this loosing of the bond, you're in the eclipse, you're in the Mars opposite, just because you're in them doesn't mean that you shouldn't be in them. Just because they're happening doesn't mean you shouldn't be with the happening. So I hope that this makes some sense. I'm doing this a little bit off the cuff because I'm just back from vacation, and was just trying to come up with something today that was a little bit quicker, because I'm a little behind on recording. I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. I'd love to hear about your encounters with astrology and how you have moved through seasons of your life where the astrology told you that things were maybe going to be a certain way, and then how did you live through it and actually experience it. I think that's one of the most rewarding elements of astrology, is that you can think about something for a year or a month or years and then live through it. And it's just so surreal to have both aspects of the experience. So I'd love to hear your reflections on this topic if you're up for it. That's what I've got. We'll be in touch again soon. A bunch of aspects coming up: Venus square Neptune, Mercury's going to get into a square with Mars again. So a couple of good aspects we'll be talking about soon. And then coming up pretty quickly, we're going to be talking about the astrology of August already. It's hard to believe. All right, take it easy, everyone. Bye.